Some mistakes take 3 seconds to make and a lifetime to understand. Terminal 3 of JFK International never changed. The same fluorescent lighting that turned everyone's skin sallow, the same smell of Starbucks and anxiety, the same echoing announcements that nobody listened to anymore. Jennifer Watkins stood frozen near Gate 47 with her roller bag tilted at an awkward angle, watching her entire past walk toward her in a tailored suit she couldn't afford. Dave Carmichael had lost weight. That was the first thing she noticed. The second was the woman on his arm, brunette, polished, wearing heels that probably cost more than Jennifer's rent. The third thing she noticed, with a sickening clarity that made her stomach drop, was the way Dave's eyes swept right past her, like she was part of the terminal furniture. 3 months since he'd ended their engagement. 3 months since he'd told her that his career trajectory required a different kind of partner. That had been the exact phrase he'd used, different kind of partner. As if she were a business liability he was divesting from. Jennifer's fingers tightened on the handle of her suitcase. She should walk away. She should turn around and disappear into the crowd and let him pass by without ever knowing she'd been there. That would be the dignified thing to do. But Dave laughed at something his new fiancé said, loud enough for half the terminal to hear, and something inside Jennifer's chest cracked. She looked wildly around the crowded gate area, searching for something, anything, someone, and that's when she saw him. He stood apart from the crowd the way certain people always do, like he occupied a different dimension than everyone else. Tall, Asian features, black hair slicked back with precision. A suit that was somehow both perfectly conventional and subtly wrong. Too well-fitted, too expensive, cut in a way that suggested it was hiding something. But it was the tattoos that made her breath catch. Intricate patterns that crept up from his collar, disappearing beneath the fabric, visible on his hands where they rested at his sides. Dragons and chrysanthemums and something that looked like flames. He was looking at his phone, completely unaware of her existence. Jennifer didn't think. Thinking was what had kept her small for so long, kept her acceptable, kept her quiet. She just moved. "Please," she whispered, appearing suddenly at his elbow, her voice desperate and low. "I know this is insane, but I need you to pretend you know me. Just for 2 minutes. Please." The stranger's eyes lifted from his phone, dark, sharp, assessing. For a moment she thought he would refuse, thought he would step away from this crazy woman accosting him in an airport terminal. Then his gaze shifted past her shoulder, landing on Dave and his fiancée now just 20 feet away, and something changed in his expression. Something calculating. Something almost amused. "How well do I know you?" he asked, his English flawless but accented, each word precisely placed. "Well enough to," Jennifer's voice broke. "Well enough to hug me. Please, just pretend to hug me." The stranger studied her for one more heartbeat. Then he pocketed his phone, and his expression transformed into something that looked almost tender. "Jennifer," he said, like he'd said her name 1,000 times before. "I've been looking for you." And then Kim Dangbong, underboss of the Baekpa syndicate and one of the most dangerous men in 3 countries, pulled a woman he'd never met into his arms and sealed both their fates in the process. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is over there. I love knowing where these stories travel. The champagne had been Jennifer's idea, back when she still thought they were celebrating together. She'd bought the good bottle, the one that cost $43, which meant she'd be eating ramen for the rest of the week. But Dave had gotten the promotion. Senior Vice President of Strategic Development at Carmichael and Worth, the firm his uncle had founded. At 32, he was the youngest person to ever hold the position. The press release had gone out that morning, and Dave's phone hadn't stopped buzzing since. Jennifer had read it 3 times, memorizing the words. Visionary leadership. Exceptional talent. The future of the firm. She'd felt proud in a way that made her chest ache. For years they'd been together. For years of supporting his late nights and networking dinners and weekend conferences. For years of being the person who believed in him when the promotions were slow in coming. Now they'd finally made it. Dave came home at 7, loosening his tie as he walked through the door of their apartment. Jennifer noticed he didn't meet her eyes. He'd been doing that a lot lately, looking just past her shoulder, like she was slightly out of focus. "I got the champagne," she said, gesturing to the bottle sweating on the counter. "The French one you like." "Jennifer." He said her name like a sigh, like something he was tired of carrying. "We need to talk." The floor didn't actually tilt beneath her feet, but it felt like it did. Those 4 words had a weight to them that made the champagne bottle suddenly look ridiculous, hopeful and stupid and small. "Okay," she said quietly. Dave ran his hand through his hair. the gesture he always made when he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. This promotion changes things. You understand that, right? The caliber of people I'm going to be dealing with now, the events I'll need to attend, the expectations. I'll get a new dress, Jennifer interrupted, hating how small her voice sounded. For the events. I can. It's not about a dress. Dave finally looked at her, and his eyes were flat. Decided. Jennifer, you're a waitress. The word hung in the air between them like an accusation. I'm a server at a fine dining restaurant, she corrected automatically, though she didn't know why it mattered. And I'm taking online courses. You've been taking online courses for 2 years. He wasn't being cruel, exactly. That was almost worse. He was being practical. Reasonable. Look, you're a good person. You are. But I'm going to be photographed now. Written about. My wife will be part of my brand, and I need someone who can. He stopped, recalibrated. I deserve someone who can match what I've built. Jennifer stared at him. For years. 4 years of meal prepping his lunches and proofreading his presentations and listening to his anxieties at 2 a.m. For years of making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. I deserve better, Dave said, and he actually sounded like he believed it. Like he'd convinced himself this was fair. You understand, right? The champagne bottle was still sweating on the counter, condensation pooling beneath it in a spreading circle. Jennifer understood perfectly. 3 months of silence, and then the universe decided Jennifer hadn't suffered enough. She saw the back of his head first, that particular way Dave's hair sat, shorter on the sides now, more executive. She was returning from her grandmother's funeral in Ohio, exhausted and hollow, wearing the only black dress she owned that wasn't her work uniform. Her flight back to New York had been delayed twice. She just wanted to get home, crawl into bed, and sleep for 16 hours. Instead, she got this. Dave turned, laughing at something, and Jennifer saw her. The replacement. She was everything Jennifer wasn't. Tall where Jennifer was average, polished where Jennifer felt perpetually rumpled, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Jennifer's entire wardrobe. Brunette hair that moved like it had been professionally styled that morning. A handbag with interlocking C's that Jennifer recognized from magazine ads. They were walking straight toward her gate. Jennifer's first instinct was to hide. Duck into the bathroom, press herself behind a pillar, anything. But her legs wouldn't move. She stood there like a deer in headlights, her carry-on bag tilted sideways, watching her ex-fiancé and his new life approach. Dave hadn't seen her yet. He was too busy being the center of his own universe, that familiar confidence radiating off him like cologne. The woman touched his arm possessively, said something that made him grin. The same grin he used to give Jennifer, back when she still believed in things like forever. They were 20 feet away now. 15. Jennifer's throat closed up. In approximately 10 seconds, Dave was going to walk past her, maybe recognize her, maybe not. Maybe he'd stop and introduce his new fiancée. Hi, Jennifer. This is Clarissa. She's a corporate attorney. Or maybe he'd just keep walking like she was part of the furniture. She didn't know which would be worse. Her eyes darted around the gate area desperately. Gate agents. Business travelers on laptops. A family with screaming toddlers. And then, him. Standing apart from everyone else like he occupied a different frequency. Black suit, tattooed hands, the kind of face that made people look twice and then look away quickly. He was staring at his phone with the focused disinterest of someone who flew first class and was used to being left alone. Jennifer didn't think. Thinking was what had kept her small for so long. She crossed the space between them in 4 steps, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized. Broader. The tattoos on his neck continued under his collar in patterns that suggested they went much, much further. Please, she whispered, appearing at his elbow. Her voice came out ragged. I know this is insane, but I need you to pretend you know me. Just for 2 minutes. Dark eyes lifted from the phone screen. Sharp. Assessing. Dangerous in a way that made every nerve in her body scream that this was a terrible idea. But Dave's laugh echoed across the terminal, and Jennifer's desperation crested like a wave. Please, she said again, hating how broken she sounded. Just pretend to hug me. The stranger's gaze shifted past her shoulder. Found Dave. Found the woman on his arm. Something changed in his expression, something calculating and almost amused. How well do I know you? He asked, his accent turning each word into something precise and deliberate. Well enough, Jennifer breathed. The stranger pocketed his phone. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile on someone less dangerous. Then come here, he said, and opened his arms. The hug lasted exactly long enough to be convincing. Dang Bong's arms were solid around her, one hand pressed against her back, the other cradling the back of her head like they'd done this 1,000 times before. He smelled like expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Leather, maybe, or smoke. Jennifer's face was pressed against his chest, and she could feel his heartbeat, steady and unhurried. Like terrifying strangers in airports was just another Tuesday for him. "Breathe," he murmured against her hair, so quietly only she could hear. "You're shaking." She was. She hadn't realized. Over Dang Bong's shoulder, Jennifer watched Dave stop mid-stride. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, shock, and then something that looked uncomfortably like jealousy. The woman on his arm tugged at his sleeve, asking something Jennifer couldn't hear. Dang Bong pulled back slightly, just enough to cup Jennifer's face in his hands. His palms were warm, and the tattoos on his fingers were even more intricate up close, scales and claws rendered in perfect detail. He looked at her like she was the only person in the entire terminal. "I'm sorry I'm late," he said, loud enough to carry. Traffic from the city was murder. The word murder seemed to hang in the air a beat longer than necessary. Then he turned, still keeping one arm around Jennifer's waist, and acknowledged Dave with the kind of cool glance that people gave when noticing something mildly unpleasant. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. He stood differently, shoulders back, spine straight, radiating the kind of quiet authority that made other men instinctively step back. Dave did exactly that. "Step back." "Dave," Jennifer heard herself say, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "We should board," Dang Bong interrupted smoothly, turning her away from Dave like he was garbage that didn't warrant further attention. "First class is already boarding." He guided her past Dave and his fiancée with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Jennifer caught a glimpse of Dave's face as they walked by, red, confused, diminished somehow. The woman was whispering furiously at him, her perfectly styled hair finally showing some disarray. They walked in silence until they reached the windows overlooking the tarmac. Jennifer's entire body was still trembling, adrenaline and relief, and something like hysteria all fighting for dominance. "I don't actually have a first-class ticket," she said stupidly. "I know." Dang Bong released her waist and reached into his jacket pocket. When his hand emerged, it held a business card, matte black, expensive cardstock, with silver embossing that caught the light. A dragon coiled across it, breathtakingly detailed, wrapped around a single phone number. No name, no title, just the dragon and the number. He held it out to her. Jennifer stared at it. "I don't understand." "I liked your bravery," Dang Bong said simply. His accent shaped the word bravery into something with more weight than it usually carried. Stupid, perhaps. Reckless, definitely. But brave. He pressed the card into her palm, his tattooed fingers folding her hand closed around it. "When you want to thank me properly, call that number." "I don't even know your name," Jennifer whispered. His smile was slight, dangerous, and somehow sad. "You will." Then he walked away, heading toward the first-class boarding line with the easy stride of someone who owned every space he entered. Jennifer watched him disappear through the gate, the black card burning like a brand against her palm. Behind her, she heard Dave's voice calling her name, angry now, demanding. But for the first time in 3 months, Jennifer didn't turn around. She was too busy staring at the dragon. Jennifer stared at the card for 5 days before she called. She'd pulled it out 100 times, while serving tables, while lying in bed at 3 a.m., while riding the subway to work. The dragon seemed to shift in different light, scales catching silver in ways that shouldn't have been possible with just embossing. She'd almost thrown it away twice. She'd almost called 3 times that many. On the 6th day, she dialed the number. A woman answered in Korean, then switched to English, so seamless Jennifer barely caught the transition. "Miss Watkins, Mr. Kim has been expecting your call." Jennifer's stomach dropped. He knew her name. How did he know her name? "Kashiwa, 8 o'clock tonight. A car will collect you at 7:30. The line went dead before Jennifer could ask any of the 1,000 questions racing through her mind. The car turned out to be a black sedan with windows tinted so dark they looked illegal. The driver didn't speak, just held the door open, and waited while Jennifer second-guessed every decision that had led her here. She got in anyway. Kashiwa was the kind of restaurant that didn't have prices on the menu, because if you needed to ask, you didn't belong there. Jennifer had walked past it 100 times, watching wealthy patrons disappear through its unmarked door. She'd never imagined she'd walk through it herself. Dang Bong was already seated when the hostess led her to a private room. He'd removed his jacket, and the tattoos Jennifer had only glimpsed at the airport were now on full display. Intricate sleeves that wound up both arms, disappearing under the rolled cuffs of his white shirt. Dragons and tigers and flowers she couldn't name, rendered in colors that seemed to move in the candlelight. He stood when she entered. Old-fashioned manners from a man who looked like he'd never followed a rule in his life. "You came," he said, and he sounded genuinely pleased. "You knew my name." Jennifer stayed near the door, not quite ready to commit to sitting. "How did you know my name?" I asked. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please. I promise the food is better than the mystery." She sat, but only because her knees felt unreliable. Dinner arrived without them ordering. Course after course of food Jennifer couldn't pronounce, but that tasted like nothing she'd ever experienced. Dang Bong ate with the same precise economy he did everything else, but he also asked questions. Real ones. About her grandmother's funeral, about Ohio, about why she'd looked so desperate at the airport. Jennifer found herself answering. Found herself impossibly relaxing. "Your ex-fiancé," Dang Bong said between courses. He was a fool. "He got promoted," Jennifer said like that explained anything. "Senior vice president. He needed someone who matched his success." Success. Dang Bong's lip curled slightly. Is that what he calls it? Abandoning someone who stood beside him when he had nothing? He shook his head. "In my world, we have a word for men like that. Coward." Something warm and dangerous unfurled in Jennifer's chest. "Your world," she repeated carefully. "What world is that exactly?" Dang Bong smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. It made him look younger. Almost vulnerable. A complicated one. "But right now, I'm just a man having dinner with a brave woman who grabbed a stranger in an airport." He raised his glass. "To bravery. And second chances." Jennifer lifted her glass. The crystal caught the light the same way the dragon on his card had. "To bravery," she echoed, and realized she meant it. She also realized, with a jolt that felt like touching a live wire, that Dang Bong was surprisingly, dangerously human beneath all those tattoos. And that maybe, just maybe, she was in trouble. Dave was waiting outside Marcello's when Jennifer's shift ended. She saw him leaning against the brick wall near the employee entrance, still wearing his work clothes, charcoal suit, burgundy tie, the same self-satisfied posture he'd always had. Like the world owed him something just for showing up. It was nearly midnight, and the street was mostly empty except for a few lingering smokers from the kitchen staff. Jennifer's first instinct was to turn around and go back inside. Wait him out. But she'd spent 4 years making herself smaller for this man, and she was tired of shrinking. She pushed through the door. "Jennifer." Dave straightened immediately, and she caught the flash of something ugly in his expression before he smoothed it over. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." She moved to walk past him, but he stepped into her path. "Who is he?" The question came out sharp, demanding. "The guy from the airport." "I looked into him." Jennifer's blood went cold. "You looked into him?" "Kim Dangbong." Dave said the name like an accusation. "Do you have any idea who you're playing with? The company he keeps? The things people say about him? That's none of your business. It is when you're embarrassing yourself." Dave's voice rose, and 2 line cooks glanced over from their cigarette break. "Jesus, Jennifer, I know you were hurt, but throwing yourself at some tattooed thug just to make me jealous? It's pathetic." The word landed like a slap. "I'm not trying to make you jealous, Dave. I'm trying to live my life." "By gold digging?" He laughed bitter and mean. "That's what this is, right? You couldn't keep me, so you found some criminal with money to throw around. Do you think a man like that actually wants you? You're a novelty, Jennifer. Something exotic for him to play with until he gets bored." Something shifted in Jennifer's chest. Not breaking, hardening. Crystallizing into something sharp and unmovable. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I'm not." Dave stepped closer, and she could smell the scotch on his breath. He'd been drinking, building his courage. "You think you're special to him? You're a waitress. You don't have the pedigree, the connections, the class." "The class?" Jennifer's laugh surprised even her. "You're lecturing me about class while ambushing me outside my work at midnight? I'm trying to save you from yourself." But his eyes were cold. Vindictive. This wasn't about saving her. This was about winning. About proving that she couldn't be happy without him. Men like Kim Dangbong don't date women like you seriously. They use them. And when he's done using you, and he will be done, you'll have nothing. No dignity, no reputation, nothing. "I already had nothing, Dave." Jennifer's voice stayed steady even though her hands were shaking. "You made sure of that when you told me I wasn't good enough for your brand. So you know what? I'd rather have nothing with someone who sees me than everything with someone who doesn't." She stepped around him, and this time he didn't block her path. But his voice followed her down the street. "He'll break your heart, Jennifer. Just like I did." Jennifer kept walking, her footsteps echoing off the empty buildings. Dave's words circled in her mind like poison. You can't keep a man like that. You're a novelty. He'll get bored. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number that she somehow knew was Dang Bong. Are you safe? Jennifer stared at the message for a long time before responding. I don't know, she typed honestly. But I'm not running. The photo appeared on a gossip blog at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Jennifer was scrolling through her phone over coffee when her roommate Keisha burst into the kitchen, eyes wide, already shoving her own phone into Jennifer's face. Tell me this isn't you. It was her. Unmistakably her. Leaving Kashiwa with Dang Bong's hand resting on the small of her back. Both of them caught mid-laugh at something. The photo was sharp, professional, taken by someone who knew what they were doing. Jennifer looked happier than she'd seen herself in years. Dang Bong looked dangerous and protective all at once, his tattooed hand visible against her dark coat. The headline made her stomach drop, Mafia's mystery woman. Who is Kim Dang Bong's new girlfriend? Oh God, Jennifer whispered. By noon, the photo was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Different blogs picked it up, each with their own breathless speculation. Some called her his secret lover. Others wondered if she was an innocent caught up in the underworld. One particularly vicious commenter suggested she was clearly using him for money and protection. Jennifer's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from people she hadn't talked to in years. Former classmates. Distant cousins. Everyone wanting to know if it was true, if she was dating him, if she knew what she was getting into. Dave called 17 times. She blocked him after the 5th. By the time her evening shift started, 2 photographers were waiting outside Marcello's. They shouted questions as she hurried past, cameras flashing in her face. Jennifer, are you and Kim Dang Bong in a relationship? How did you meet? Are you aware of his alleged criminal connections? Inside, the staff was buzzing. Marco, one of the line cooks, gave her a low whistle. Damn, Jenny. You've been holding out on us. We're not. Jennifer didn't know how to finish that sentence. What were they exactly? Her manager, Paul, pulled her aside before service started. His expression was apologetic but firm. Jennifer, I need to ask. Is this going? The dress arrived at noon in a box that probably cost more than Jennifer's rent. Black silk that moved like water, with a neckline that plunged just enough to be daring without being desperate. When Jennifer put it on, she barely recognized herself. The woman in the mirror looked like someone who belonged in Dang Bong's world. Someone who could walk into a room and demand attention. The car arrived exactly at 8. This time, Dang Bong was inside. He wore a tuxedo that made him look like violence wrapped in expensive fabric. His hair was slicked back, tattoos deliberately visible at his collar and wrists. He wasn't hiding what he was. His eyes traveled over Jennifer slowly, and something in his expression shifted from appreciation to something darker. Possessive. You're devastating, he said simply. The venue was a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, the kind of place that didn't advertise and didn't need to. Ferraris and Bentleys lined the street outside. Security personnel in black suits checked invitations with the thoroughness of people who'd seen violence and knew how to prevent it. Inside, the space had been transformed into something out of a dream or a nightmare, depending on your perspective. Crystal chandeliers hung from exposed beams. A jazz quartet played in the corner. And everywhere, people who radiated the kind of power that came from operating outside society's rules. Jennifer felt every eye in the room turn toward them when they entered. Who are these people? She whispered. People like me, Dang Bong said quietly. And people who wish they were. His hand tightened on her waist. Stay close. Some of them will try to test you. They did. A woman in red approached almost immediately, her smile sharp as a knife. Dang Bong. And this must be the famous mystery woman. Her eyes raked over Jennifer dismissively. How? Unexpected. Jennifer Watkins, Dang Bong said, his voice carrying a weight that made nearby conversations pause. My partner. The word partner landed in the room like a declaration of war. The woman in red's smile faltered. Partner. How progressive of you. Permanent, Dang Bong clarified, and his tone could have cut glass. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. I trust that's clear, Minesio. Minesio's face went carefully neutral. She inclined her head slightly, acknowledgement, not quite submission, and melted back into the crowd. Jennifer's heart was hammering. Did you just? Yes. Dang Bong guided her further into the room, and people parted like water. In this world, respect is the only currency that matters. And I just bought you all of mine. Throughout the evening, it happened again and again. People approached with veiled hostility or curiosity, and each time, Dang Bong made it clear. Jennifer wasn't a fling, wasn't a novelty, wasn't temporary. She was his, and he was hers, and anyone who thought otherwise could test that theory at their own peril. An older man with scars on his knuckles kissed Jennifer's hand and called her Mrs. Kim, even though she wasn't. A group of younger men treated her like royalty when Dang Bong introduced her. Even the servers approached with deference that made her uncomfortable. Near midnight, Dang Bong led her to a quieter corner, champagne in hand. "You're doing this for me," Jennifer said. It wasn't a question. "I'm doing this for us." He turned to face her fully, and for once his expression was completely open. Vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "In my world, showing weakness gets you killed. But you, Jennifer, you make me want to be weak. You make me want to be human." He touched her face gently, tattooed fingers tracing her jawline. "So yes, I'm forcing them to respect you. Because if they don't, they'll think they can take you from me. And I will burn this entire world down before I let that happen." Jennifer should have been terrified. Instead, she felt safer than she'd ever felt in her life. "Dance with me," she said. And in a room full of criminals and power brokers, Dang Bong smiled like she'd given him the world. Dang Bong picked her up at 2 a.m. on a Thursday with no explanation. Jennifer was half asleep when her phone rang, stumbling to answer it in the dark. "Hello. Get dressed," he said. "Something comfortable. I'm downstairs. It's 2 in the morning. I know what time it is. Please, Jennifer. Trust me." She did. That was the terrifying part. She trusted him completely. The car headed toward JFK, and Jennifer felt her confusion crystallize into something like understanding. "Why are we going to the airport?" Dang Bong's hand found hers in the darkness. "Because everything started there. And I need to go back to the beginning." Terminal 3 at 2 a.m. was a different creature than it was during the day. Quieter, emptier, haunted by the echoes of a million goodbyes and the fluorescent hum of lights that never slept. A few red-eye passengers sat slumped in chairs, but mostly the space felt abandoned. Forgotten. Dang Bong led her through the terminal with purpose, their footsteps echoing off polished floors. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. Jennifer had never seen him so casual. The tattoos on his arms were fully visible, dragons and tigers that seemed to move in the strange airport lighting. They stopped at gate 47, the exact spot where Jennifer had grabbed him 3 months ago, desperate and broken and terrified of running into her ex-fiancé. The spot where everything had changed. "I was having a terrible day," Dang Bong said quietly, staring at the empty chairs. "Business troubles. Family troubles. The kind of day where you question every decision that brought you to that moment." He turned to face her, and his expression was raw, unguarded. "And then this woman appeared out of nowhere and asked me to pretend to hug her." Jennifer's throat tightened. "I should have walked away. In my world, getting involved with civilians is dangerous. Reckless. Stupid." His lips curved into a slight smile. "But you looked at me like I was your only hope, and something in me, something I thought I'd buried years ago, woke up." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Black velvet, worn at the edges like he'd been carrying it for weeks. Jennifer's heart stopped. "I've done terrible things, Jennifer. Things I can't take back. Things that would make you run if you knew the details." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the fluorescent light. "But you make me want to be better. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." He dropped to one knee on the polished airport floor, in the exact spot where they'd met, and Jennifer felt tears streaming down her face. "I can't promise you a normal life. I can't promise you safety or simplicity or anything that ordinary people take for granted." His dark eyes held hers, fierce and desperate and somehow gentle all at once. "But I can promise you this. I will spend every day proving that you didn't make a mistake when you grabbed a stranger in an airport. I will protect you. I will fight for you. I will love you until my last breath." His voice broke slightly on the last word. "Jennifer Watkins, will you marry me?" Around them, the terminal was silent except for a distant gate announcement and the hum of the fluorescent lights. A janitor had stopped mopping to watch. 2 security guards stood frozen near the entrance. Jennifer looked down at this dangerous, complicated, surprisingly human man kneeling before her in an empty airport terminal at 2 a.m., and she knew her answer had been inevitable since the moment his arms had closed around her 3 months ago. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." Dang Bong stood and slid the ring onto her finger with hands that shook. Then he kissed her like they were the only 2 people in the world, and maybe, in that moment, they were. They married 3 weeks later in a private ceremony that somehow managed to be both intimate and impossibly grand. Jennifer wore white silk that moved like water. Dang Bong wore a tuxedo with his tattoos deliberately visible. No more hiding what he was. The venue was a rooftop garden in Manhattan, cherry blossoms imported from Korea creating a canopy of pink and white overhead. 50 guests attended, a careful mix of Dang Bong's world and what remained of Jennifer's. Her roommate Keisha cried through the entire ceremony. Even Kwan, Dang Bong's stone-faced second-in-command, looked suspiciously misty-eyed. Dave sent an email the morning of the wedding. Jennifer deleted it without reading it. The officiant asked if they'd written their own vows. Dang Bong went first. 3 months ago, I was standing in an airport, and a stranger asked me for a hug, he said, his accent making each word deliberate. I could have walked away. In my position, that would have been the smart choice. The safe choice. His eyes never left Jennifer's face. But I've spent my entire life making smart choices, and none of them ever made me feel the way you do. You saw past the tattoos and the reputation and the danger, and you chose me anyway. Not because of what I could give you, but because of who we are together. Jennifer's turn came, and her voice was steadier than she expected. I spent 4 years making myself smaller for someone who never saw me, she said. And then I spent 3 months discovering that I was never small. I just needed someone who recognized my size. She smiled through tears. You don't complete me, Dang Bong. You're not my other half. You're my equal. My mirror. The person who reminds me that I was always enough, even when I couldn't see it myself. When they kissed, cherry blossoms fell like snow. At the reception, Dang Bong pulled Jennifer onto the dance floor for their first dance. No elaborate choreography, just the two of them swaying to music that seemed to exist only for them. Are you scared? He asked quietly against her hair. Jennifer thought about it. About the photographers, the dangerous world she was entering, the uncertainty of loving someone whose life operated in shadows. Then she thought about Dave's apartment, about making herself small, about 4 years of believing she wasn't enough. No, she said honestly. I'm not scared, because I finally understand something. What's that? Love isn't about finding someone who completes you. It's about finding someone who sees you're already complete and chooses to stand beside you anyway. She pulled back to look at him. You don't save me, Dang Bong. You witness me. And that's so much more powerful. His smile was soft and devastating. When did you become so wise? When I stopped waiting for permission to be myself. They danced until the stars came out, and later, when Jennifer looked at the photos, she barely recognized the woman in them. Not because she looked different, but because she finally looked like herself. The pretend hug in the airport had become a forever promise. And Jennifer Watkins, now Jennifer Kim, had discovered that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is grab a stranger and ask for help. Because you never know who might be waiting to catch you. What this story teaches us about real love. Jennifer's journey from people pleaser to equal partner reveals a profound truth. Authentic love doesn't require you to shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations. Dave represented the conditional love so many of us accept. Love that demands we change, improve, and become enough for someone else. He saw Jennifer as a reflection of his own status, a prop in his success story. When she no longer served that purpose, he discarded her. Dang Bong, despite his dangerous world and complicated past, offered something revolutionary. He saw Jennifer exactly as she was and chose her without conditions. He didn't need her to be more polished, more educated, or more anything. He witnessed her bravery, her authenticity, and her worth. And that witnessing became the foundation of genuine partnership. The lesson? You don't need someone to complete you. You need someone who recognizes you're already whole and chooses to walk beside you as an equal. Real love doesn't diminish you to make someone else comfortable. Real love expands you by reflecting back your inherent worth. Sometimes the most courageous act is reaching out when you're desperate. Sometimes a stranger's kindness changes everything. And sometimes the person you think you need to impress is actually the person you need to leave behind. Your worth was never up for debate. It was only waiting for you to recognize it. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we're already enough, and that the right person will see it without us having to prove it. What moment in your life taught you about your own worth? Drop a comment below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.